it just gets worse for Clarence Thomas. Uh, uh, what new details come to light that the billionaire Harlan Crow, the Nazi, paid for Thomas's grandnephew to attend a private school. You know, isn't it really nice when you know a bunch of rich people or people know rich people? You can get anything you want.
All right, now to this. ProPublica out with new reporting this morning on Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. The organization has been leading the investigative reporting into Justice Thomas, having received luxury trips, real estate deals, and gifts from billionaire Harlan Crow over a 20-year period. Their newest report is regarding tuition payments for the grandnephew of Justice Thomas, who he was raising as his son. Joining us now, one of the ProPublica reporters on the story, Justin Elliott. Justin, thank you very much for joining us. This reporting is staggering. How much money are we talking about as it pertains to this tuition that the Republican donor was providing for the Supreme Court justice?
Yeah, so we don't have the full amount, but we're talking potentially in excess of $150,000. This was at two private boarding schools, one in Virginia and one in Georgia, that Justice Thomas sent his grandnephew, who he was raising as a son to.
Can I ask, Justin? I mean, here's just yet another example of Clarence Thomas getting financial benefits from a massive GOP donor. You read the Wall Street Journal editorial page on your reporting. You read the National Review, and they are shocked and stunned and deeply saddened, and said that this is just the left-wing media once again going after a public servant, a good conservative public servant. I'm sure you've read.
And no, it's people going after a corrupt justice figure who is taking bribes. This is all it is. Nobody, no rich person gives somebody else a ton of money just for no reason or just for being friends. This dude gave him gifts that was twice the amount of his annual salary. And rich people don't do that just for nothing. They do it so that they can get something in return.
Read their critiques. Could you fill in some gaps that they maybe have left intentionally open?
Sure. So I'd say a couple things. One is that, we're reporting on the entire Supreme Court, and I'm contractually obliged to say by ProPublica that, if anyone has information about other justices, they should get in touch. But,
Yeah, there needs to be a full investigation on every single Supreme Court justice and other court justices to see who is taking bribes from who, and those people need to be put in prison.
But seriously, I mean, we just haven't found anything like this relationship between Crow and Thomas with any of the other justices at this point. I mean, we're talking about a billionaire political donor who's funding, multiple aspects of the life of a justice. This private school tuition, which the story we broke today, lavish vacations on his yacht, and
funny thing is, honestly, right-wingers are trying to say that Harlan Crow is basically just a sugar daddy to Clarence Thomas. And in a case, yeah, but he is giving Harlan Crow various benefits in a different way.
His private jet over 20 years. Harlan Crow owns the house where Justice Thomas's mother is living, apparently rent-free. So this is, we actually spoke to the former chief ethics lawyer for the George W. Bush White House, Richard Painter, who said that, basically never seen anything like this. And when he was in the government, if you had a staffer taking this level of undisclosed gifts, you'd want to get them out of the government.
So, Justin, obviously, Justice Thomas has not reported these tuition payments or anything else in his annual disclosure forms. You just mentioned the Bush White House lawyers, which seemingly rebuts some of the claims this is just a partisan effort here. So has Justice Thomas offered any explanation at all as to why he thought this was proper behavior?
So Justice Thomas did not respond to our questions for this latest story. He has released one statement in response to our first story about the travel that Harlan Crow has been providing him with, in which he said, you know, look, I'm close friends with Harlan Crow, and I was advised by my colleagues that I didn't have to disclose this. They have not said, you know, who gave him that advice or exactly what that advice was. And, you know, all of the ethics lawyers we talked to say this disclosure law is quite clear that you just have to disclose gifts like this.
So, ProPublica reporter Justin Elliott, thank you very much for your reporting, and thank you for coming on this morning. And Joe, once again, it's really hard not to see how this Supreme Court justice was not exposed to being to having his objectivity impacted. Let's just say it kindly, by all the gifts over the.
Oh, no, his objectivity was influenced. You know, every time he was giving Clarence Thomas a gift, they were talking about what Harlan Crow wanted from Clarence Thomas. There is no doubt about that.
The course of decades by a Republican donor. And then you add the fact, and again, we try and be objective ourselves, but it's hard not to notice his wife texting Mark Meadows, you know, and completely involved in certain things that seem to be part of the big lie. And then you wonder what is going on. Regardless
of those who reflexively defend him, this has been a horrible 2 years, 2.5.
Yeah, we can't forget that, Clarence Thomas's wife was in support of the January 6th attack, and the right-wingers trying to turn the United States into a dictatorship with Trump in control. There was a lot of leaked information about that, and she hasn't been punished, and he hasn't been punished over that.
Years for Justice Thomas's legacy, and for Republicans who are trying to dismiss this, I can't even begin to imagine what would happen if it were Justice Sotomayor, if it was Justice Kagan.
Please.
This is again. Let's be really clear about this. Everybody at this table would be shocked and outraged and be critical if this were a liberal justice, a left-wing justice that was taking this. But
if it was a left-wing justice, the right wing would be flipping out, having hourly bits on the news about it, constantly screaming about how corrupt the left wing was. But because it's a right-winger, the right-wing media does not care about the corruption.
Sam, it's just, again, there are no rules, it appears. There is nothing that people on the Trump right can do that is going to get condemnation from most Republicans. I mean, this is a sort of stuff. I can't even imagine if any federal judge that I practiced under had taken 1/100th of these sort of gifts. I can't imagine they wouldn't be up for impeachment.
You're talking about the need to be objective. I would argue it would be non-objective if we didn't treat this as the clear-cut, scandalous behavior it is. It doesn't matter whether he was appointed by a Republican president or as a conservative jurist. This is very evidently clear-cut, problematic ethics. And to your point, I thought about this a little bit. If it was associate or one of his clerks who, in the course of discovery, found out a big donor had secretly paid for that clerk's wife's tuition, that clerk would be tossed out of the court tomorrow. Yes. If it was someone in our profession, imagine a reporter who quietly took $150 in benefits from a donor. That person would lose all credibility instantaneously and never be able to be in this profession. So, yes, we need to objectively assess the situation by noting clearly just how absurd and outlandish it actually is.
And it was not disclosed.
And
That's
not disclosed.
Not disclosed. The annual disclosure form Justice Thomas expects us to take seriously his reading of the subtlest nuances of our Constitution and what every clause means in the original and everything. You know, very, very carefully parsing that, and he also wants us to believe he can't understand the very simple instructions on a disclosure form.
It's ridiculous, and the court's doing nothing. John Roberts, who I've always said was an institutionalist, certainly not acting like an institutionalist now, because somebody that wanted.
Well, yeah, because now if all the other justices decide to speak about what Clarence Thomas is doing, then it may mean they have to shed light on the corruption that they're doing. This is why we need a full investigation on every single Supreme Court justice.
Wanted to protect the institution with the Supreme Court's approval ratings at an all-time low, would step forward and be far more active than this. This is something you just can't sit back and leave for vacation this summer and just hope it goes away. So if you're an institutionalist, David, and let me say again, I want to underline this fact for the Chief Justice. The Supreme Court's credibility with the American people is at an all-time low.
So, Joe, I think you're right that this comes down to the Chief Justice. We really don't want a situation, Jackie, you cover Congress, where Congress is trying to legislate rules for another branch of government. It may come to that. But isn't this centrally Chief Justice Roberts' responsibility, that he's the person who can say, this reporting isn't partisan, this reporting is about the basics of accountability that every other judge in America has to deal with, and we do too. And here are the rules that I, as Chief Justice, am going to announce.
Yeah, well, interestingly, Judge Michael Luttig and Lawrence Tribe, who appeared before the Senate Judiciary Committee earlier this week, advised Congress that they could not pass a bill forcing the Supreme Court to impose their own set of rules, but under the Constitution, they were allowed to actually create a bill that outlined a code of conduct and then have that enforced by some independent arbiter. And that is the bill
forward.
Exactly. And that is the bill that Lisa Murkowski and Angus King proposed last week. There is not any sort of unanimous consent about this bill in any way, but you did have Republicans and Democrats agree that this is problematic. But I will say,
yeah, how many people are going to vote on that bill and have it pass and force the Supreme Court to actually be good people? Probably not a whole lot.
Judges are still untouchable politically, even when I'm thinking back to our reporting during the January 6th committee that investigated the attack on the Capitol. Liz Cheney privately did not want to touch Clarence Thomas. She's the most outspoken Republican against a lot of sort of the Democratic backsliding and issues that we've seen with the Republican Party. And she had said to her privately to staffers and investigators that she didn't want to touch Clarence Thomas's wife. She didn't want to continue to make that a spotlight, and she thought it was irrelevant to the.
Wow. Yeah, that's no surprise there. Liz Cheney is still a Republican through and through.
Investigation writ large, and a lot of her colleagues, Democrats at the time, felt like that was because she didn't want to be the Republican responsible for taking down Clarence Thomas.
Well, Clarence Thomas, though, in fact, didn't he rule in a case that it was the lone dissenter?
Exactly.
That touched exactly on what his wife was involved in.
Failed to recuse himself once again.
The Washington Post, Jackie Alamany, thank you very much.